Sup guys, with the ongoing raid event, I wanted to take the opportunity to test out some of my theories regarding how ballistics affect the real DPS of certain guns. As usual with these testing videos, the raw footage and results will be linked in the description. Although if you really want to be certain, you should just test things out for yourself. I won't be adjusting my fleet tech, so things like firepower and reload might swing things in one way or another for me compared to you. You only have to do this stuff if you care or find it interesting, as you can play the game just fine without any of this deep diving. In this video, I'm going to compare the two best destroyer main guns and the two best light cruiser main guns. I wanted to see how real results compared to paper DPS figures and find out if any of them overperform or underperform. There are some things that you need to keep in mind about tests conducted on this boss. It has medium armor and spends most of the fight not moving, but moves a bit near the end of the fight. Since it doesn't move a lot, guns with lower shell speeds, typically the ones with HE ammo, will overperform relative to guns with higher shell speeds, which are typically the AP ones. As for the guns I'm using, I did 10 runs each using Curlew for the destroyer guns and Kurakoa for the light cruiser guns. Both of them have two main gun mounts and pretty much no other damage sources, so the differences are going to be purely based on the damage of the guns. I also loaded them up with firepower boosting equipment just to minimize the impact of the firepower stat, but even with all the bonuses, it's still within the ballpark of destroyers like Mogador and the DDGs. Since this boss has medium armor, if we go purely by paper DPS, the Mogador gun should deal approximately 73% more damage than the Twin 100. When factoring in the extra 30 firepower from the Mogador gun, the difference becomes approximately 85%. From the actual results though, the Twin 138 dealt approximately 93% more damage than the Twin 100, overperforming expectations by about 5%. The difference would be even greater if the enemy moved a lot, because the higher shell speed of the AP Twin 138 would be more impactful, and also if the ship you're using the guns on have much less firepower than Kurakoa, the 30 extra firepower would make a bigger difference. However, since the difference was always so big to begin with, it doesn't really change any recommendations knowing that the Twin 138 is even more stronger than the Twin 100 than expected. The next pair of guns are the French light cruiser gun and the Plymouth gun. For these two, I personally was always of the opinion that despite what the DPS table says, the Plymouth gun is always stronger than the French gun, but it seems like that was not the case. The two guns have the same spread, which means they would have about the same hit rate against a stationary enemy, but the French gun has much lower shell speed, which is detrimental against a moving enemy. Since the enemy here only moves a little bit, the advantage that the Plymouth gun has in shell speed doesn't come into play much if at all. Looking at their paper DPS with the firepower difference taken into account, Plymouth gun should win out just slightly, but ended up being on the losing end instead. In 10 runs, it performed 3% worse than expected, but the margins are so close that it doesn't really conclude anything about exactly how much worse the Plymouth gun is compared to the French gun. I would just say that they're about the same against medium armor. The thing is though, unlike the previous case with the destroyer guns, we're not talking about whether a gun is 80% stronger or 90% stronger, but these two guns are very close to each other. On top of that, against light armor, the French gun is stronger than the Plymouth gun by an even greater margin. Therefore, I would expect that the French gun will outperform the Plymouth gun against light armor targets, barring some kind of awkward movement pattern or very high speed, and then about tied against medium armor, with the Plymouth gun pulling ahead if the ship has strong barrages, and then lose against heavy armor, but both guns are weak against heavy and it won't really have an impact on the outcome of the battle one way or another. A ship like Plymouth with many powerful barrages will see more benefit out of using the Plymouth gun against medium armor, but the difference is smaller than I originally thought. Also, the Plymouth gun can hit multiple targets, being AP, so it's probably better in campaign, but whether or not it makes a real difference in the outcome of the battle, I'm not so sure. Therefore, it is probably not a bad idea to upgrade the French light cruiser gun to +13 for Vanguard use, given that it only costs 120 plates and performs close to the Plymouth gun even with the difference in firepower taken into account. Since they're so close in performance, even with firepower accounted for, I could see a situation where you have someone like Helena in your vanguard and then a battleship in your main fleet, and then giving Helena a plus 13 French gun and the battleship a plus 10 Plymouth gun for the firepower bonus would result in higher total damage dealt than giving Helena a plus 13 Plymouth gun and the battleship a 45 firepower secondary gun. I'm personally considering upgrading my French gun to plus 13 now, but I'm not fully sure yet. 120 plates isn't too steep of an investment, but there's no way in hell I'm gonna upgrade a second Plymouth gun to plus 13. One more thing I wanted to check was whether the Twin 138 or Twin 100 would be better for San Diego, since the Twin 138 is stronger than I expected. During these tests, I had my vanguard stand still in front of the boss, because I also wanted to test Fritz Rume's gun, but I messed up by giving Fritz Rume a plus 13 Plymouth gun, which meant that the results for Rume had to be scrapped. For San Diego, the only things that change by not putting the battle on auto is make it so that she doesn't fire her torpedoes, which actually makes the results more consistent and has nothing to do with the guns. And also, she won't move out of range for the Twin 100, so the Twin 100 will overperform just slightly. Against medium armor, using the Twin 138 resulted in approximately 8% more damage than the Twin 100 for San Diego. If she was moving around on auto, the difference would be even greater, I would assume about 13% or so. Therefore, San Diego's unique augment barrage almost does manage to make the Twin 100 worth using against medium armor, despite how big the gap between the guns themselves is. In general, you should definitely still use the Twin 100 because it would perform better against the other two armor types while being very close against medium armor. However, if you're ever using San Diego against only medium armor for some reason, then the 138 seems to be the clear better choice. Anyway, that's about it for this video. If you don't know a thing about equipment and this video left you very confused, I would suggest checking out the in-depth equipment guide linked in the description. If you have questions and want to test things out for yourself, you should first watch the video where I talk about misleading information to be aware of when looking at end screen numbers. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.